Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Welcome to RustShip. RustShip is the podcast for developers who ship code with Rust. I'm your host, Marco Iani. I'm a Rust developer and I enjoy talking to other people, especially other developers and especially about Rust. So here we are. This is episode number 6 and today we have Lisa Bassing with us. Hi Lisa.
Hello.
I met Lisa at Eurorust 23, and I saw her talk about like creating art with Rust, and I would say it was a breath of fresh air because I think most of the people see Rust as a language that is hard to learn and hard to use. While yeah, showing it using for fun stuff and creative things, it was really nice. I will ask Lisa about how she uses Rust to create interactive artworks and how to get started with embedded systems and get development. So very fun stuff. I think it's going to be an interesting episode. Lisa, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
I've been in the Rust community for some time, but I've been doing weird games and creative stuff for much longer. I was actually recently thinking, I think about since 2013, but like back then I was doing front-end development mostly, then transitioned to full stack development. I was doing all kinds of things really, and then realized at some point that since I do a lot of like creative stuff in my free time and usually it's never the work that I do, maybe I should just make this sort of kind of my main job. I still have yet to be paid to make an actual game. Like usually the stuff that I do is related to games or related to interactive pieces of software. But yeah, I think that's the end goal, to actually like be paid to make games in some capacity. But what I really always liked about like making games in the process is thinking about these like games as a system is, I think, the factor that fascinates me the most, that you like, okay, you have to think of the rules and think about, okay, what should the player or the user do? How do you want them to interact with what you're creating? What are the kinds of decisions that you want to show them, and then to think about it. So I really like this, and from programming point of view, it was also always like quite challenging. Well, not always challenging, but it was usually like things that I had to think about while developing. That, if you like work at a startup or like later I worked at an NGO where you did like mainly web services in some capacity, and it's like usually always the same. Like you talk to a database and you have some user input, and then you have an API and the client, and it's all nice, but at the end of the day, it's mostly the same. And then for games, I had this whole new field of like, okay, so then I have to like deal with graphics somehow, and then like, okay, how should I like, I had to like think about maths, like certain matrices, and then like values and vectors, and then how to like I've read so much about vector math over the years. It was like, oh my god, had I known that in school, like with the knowledge I know now, like math would have been like my number one subject, I think, and physics, but it was not back then.
Cool. So you would say that math is required to write games?
I wouldn't say it's required, and it definitely depends on the kind of game you want to do. But as I make more games and make more weird games, and also kind of like when you want to experiment with certain mechanics and just think like, okay, how would like basically every time you want to like shoot something or you want to like aim at a thing and then things should move, you kind of have to think about it in terms of vectors, and then you're kind of like even if the most simple like collision detection, there's like multiple ways you can like think about it in terms of math. And sure, a lot of engines abstract this completely away from you. Then you just have like some kind of collider, and when the collider collides with another thing, you get an event, and you're like, yeah, this is what I use. But I was actually introduced to game development with the 2D game engine Love2D. It's written in Lua, so you script it in Lua, and it is very bare bones, and you get nothing with it out of the box except for like, here's like a setup function and a loop, and here you go. And it's like, okay, and then you really had to think of, okay, what are all the things that I need to just, so like one of the, I think my third or second game was like the first where I was thinking of, or like had a super simple, I don't even want to call it AI, but like a little agent algorithm that was like moving by itself as like an opponent, and it would change objective based on like the mode in the game. And it was just like, okay, so it was the first time I had to think of, okay, so this agent should automatically move towards either this goal or me as an opponent. And then thinking of like how does the steering work? And it was like, and because I had nothing, I had to code everything myself, and was like, oh my god, my brain hurts. But it was like very like I learned a lot, and then I think it's at some point you're either you want to make a game quickly, or maybe you want to learn something more, and then you maybe try to like build things yourself, and you're like, oh, okay, activate the brain.
Okay, so you're saying that in your first experience, there weren't a lot of abstractions and you need to figure out things from yourself, right? Do you find this approach useful? Because I do. Like, I think that if you have too many abstractions, then you don't learn the fundamentals.
Absolutely, yeah. Like if you want to phrase it like this, yes, I think especially in web development, I feel like it's a problem.
Yeah,
I also
exactly.
do less and less web development because I'm like, this is too much. Like HTML is just strings, man. Like I don't need everything around this.
Yeah, I think in modern web frameworks,
Yeah.
like sometimes you don't even know if something is processed in the client or in the servers. But yeah, let's proceed in order. So you said that you stopped being a full stack engineer or like web engineer, and you moved to being a self-employed creative technologist, right? So before watching your talk
Yeah.
at Eurorust, I didn't know what a creative technologist was. So yeah, I would like to ask you, what is a creative technologist and how did you get there?
It's such a good question because I never really know how to answer it. Creative technologist is a job that has no definition, but then a lot of jobs in the tech industry don't really have a like definition. Like sometimes, like as you said, sometimes like it's software developer or software engineer, and then like the lines are blurry. It's like, what does it even mean? But like so creative technologist, and the term that I learned where it was then, okay, I want to use this for me, is more about, so it's like about finding, like on one hand, handling different kinds of technologies, like not being like stuck on this like one thing, which to me is really important. So while I can do web development, I don't want to be like, that's just not the only thing that I want to do. So it can be different kinds of things for different kinds of also not really standardized or like creative problems in a way. And I also really like thinking about these things that are just like really weird and nobody would think about like doing software for this. It's also usually in fields that don't have the money to have software developed for them. So that's a challenge as well. But yeah, so I wanted to be like something with games, but maybe something with web. I'm also actually, I would really love to get into audio programming recently because I think it's super fascinating. But it's once again like a field where I'm like, oh, that's so much to learn as well. Completely underestimated it. But yeah, it's like just like learning, like there's so much to learn, and I really like this learning aspect and the challenge of it. And then out of all of this, what still stands out to me is game development, because it combines so many things of so many technical areas. Like even it's like just the audio programming. It's such like in games you have both sound effects and then like actual like score music or sound design. So you can always think like, I really like recording like little sound effects myself, like beep boop boop, and then like, or like different kinds of things, because it's just like fun and you can just do it and then it's in your game. It's also a huge gimmick if you do, like I sometimes do workshops with teenagers or kids, make a game together, and they're like, nah, if they have to do it, it's like, I don't want to do programming, I just want to play the game. And then you can say it's like, oh, but you can also draw art, or like we can like make sound effects, and then like this is like, oh, okay, and then you're like, okay, this is something else, and then it's still like, especially if you do a group project, it's like very nice for them. So like, yeah, it encompasses a lot of things, creative solutions, creative problems, and I get to play with lots of different things, and I really like it.
Nice. Yeah, like you are a creative technologist, but you're also self-employed, right? And yeah, you mentioned that you're trying to, of course, make a living out of it. I think for many people, it's a bit scary to move to self-employment. And what was your reasons why you did this choice?
On the one hand, I was really fed up with being employed, because I feel like in especially in tech, we sometimes have this feeling of you can't, especially if like your company grows and you're like there, you see all the problems, but then you feel like you can't really address them unless you move like to the management path. But like, no, like I don't want this. And then it's kind of like you want the freedom somehow. Like I always wanted to be like, I don't want to work in a job that I think is bad, or that like that where I see so many problems that like I personally can't go to work every day in a job where I'm like, this is bad for this and this and this and this reason, but I just do it anyway because money. That's just not like I think people can work like this, and I admire it a little bit, because I think my life would be easier if I could do this too. So this is one hand. On the other hand, doing creative work is I don't even know where I would like if I still wanted to do the things I do now. I don't even know where I would find like a proper employment, to be honest, because it's usually it's very small projects. Like one of the long time things that I'm working with is together with a theater collective to do participatory like or interactive performances, and they have to, for every project they have to write grant proposals, and like it's always kind of like, oh, will we get the money or not? But it's kind of like this, from one project to the next, kind of seeing if you get money for it, and if there's no money and there's no projects, I work on my own, and I'm happy that I'm married and can rely on my wife to bring home the money and pay the rent. So this is very comfortable for me. But I can see it's not for everybody, because it is scary if I would have to like do this all on my own and be like, okay, I really need to pay rent.
I see. And so let's say that there are some people that maybe, yeah, they want to do creative work with computer science. So maybe they are interested in this creative technologies path. What are the options to make a living out of it? Because, for example, I imagine that maybe expositions can commission you some works to, I don't know, to make their events more interactive. Yeah, to add something to their events. And also, yeah, you mentioned people that might want to commission you games. What are the possibilities to make money out of this?
I think for starters, if you really just like want to get into like trying out art things, I would try and see if you can get somehow like a part-time deal with your current employer, or find like some kind of thing where you at least get like, one, or maybe if you're good, like 2 days a week, just to like work on your own, because what you do really need if you do want to do any kind of like artsy technical work is that you do need some kind of a portfolio. While I do think it's people who can program are kind of always needed, so it's there's not that much pressure on a big portfolio or a good portfolio, as long as you have one or two things that you can show and you can say, "Hi, I don't know how to program." That would actually get you already like very far. But you do need a little bit to show. That is true. So if work like maybe one or two projects documented well, especially for non-techie people. So the people who curate exhibitions or who give out the grant money, they like to see cool new hip technology and interactive things, but they don't fully understand what you're talking about. So like nobody in the art world, nobody care about if you like write this in Rust or if you write this in PHP, like seriously. So this is the kind of like documented and say like, oh, you had this kind of concept, but it has like leave out all the technical terms for like the technical, like just write like a technical section where you can nerd out about it for other people. But like the focus should be on artists or like regular people. And this is kind of where I also struggle with, because I'm like, we do it like this, and then I draw like diagrams of like how we arrange this, and then people in the collective are like, okay, and then now you write it again for the non-technical people because that's how we need to present this to in the grant proposal. And yeah, okay. But then once you get a thing, and then it's all about word of mouth. So if you get into one exhibition, actually you can. It's very much like, oh, this exhibition had me, and then it's like, because what most curators do is they look at other exhibitions and see like, oh, who exhibited there, and then they find you, and then they eventually,
Yeah.
get in touch with you.
I also imagine that people who organize exhibitions go to other exhibitions. So maybe if they like your work, for sure they will go to their exhibitions. And yeah, I think that the skill of talking to a non-developer audience is a great skill to develop. So yeah, nice. So also you are studying creative technologies, right? You are doing a master about it. And yeah, once again, before watching your talk, I never heard of this path. So for people who are choosing the university, like what should they expect if they choose this master?
Yeah, it was actually like really funny how I found this master's program that is just like titled what I call myself already. I don't know if it's like the only one, but it's like one of the very few universities that like offer a program that's just like called like this. And it's at the Film University in Potsdam, which is the big like film studio in Germany, Potsdam Babelsberg. So the whole university is actually focused around filmmaking in like all various aspects. So there's like, there's from acting to script writing to like everything with like camera and sound. It's all there. And creative technologies, we call it CTech for short. Like the idea was a little bit to, I don't want to say post-production, but like interact with like modern ways of making film. And I also learned now that, because like for me, I have nothing to do with film or filmmaking, that it's actually quite interesting with what film studies kind of experiment with in a way. So things like 360-degree film is also something that you watch with VR, with a VR headset. So like from there, it's like the next step from there is like a VR thing, or non-linear film where you as the viewer decide what's happening next in the film. Where I would then say, okay, that's where we blur the line between film and video game. Because like if I let a person decide what happens next, this is very gamey already.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like along the lines of, yeah, like experimenting with new technologies, but like under the big umbrella of film. But luckily we're not like focused on film. So we do like all kinds of things. Also like lots of working with Unreal Engine, which is used for digital production. So like, building real-time sets with lighting, also for film. But also we have physical computing and like audio and graphics programming. So it's very diverse and covers a lot of things that I didn't know a lot about. This is also where my new interest in audio programming comes from. It's like, I never thought about this. This is really cool.
Well, it sounds really interesting, absolutely, and fun. Yeah. So, and yeah, your talk at Eurorust was about alt control games. We said that alt control games are games, but they don't have like usual controls. So, like you don't play with your keyboard maybe or your joystick. So, how did you get into alt control games, and why do you like building these games instead of like usual games that we are all used to?
I think it combines this weird obsession maybe that I have with how we interact with computers and software, and also my love for video games. And I don't even know where I first really came across it, because I think maybe from the other side, I learned about like physical computing, so Arduinos and sensors and DIY electronics around 2018, I think. And that was like mind blowing to me as well, like because I think the only time before when I actually was like thinking about how do I build a circuit to do a thing was like in school, in like some physics class where we had to like, I don't know, it's like this is how the switch thingy looks in a schematic. I don't know if anybody, like if people still learn this today, I don't know. But then we did this with like, and then like, you can program the Arduino and you can do whatever. And we had this, it was like a 4-week course And at the end of the course, we were also supposed to exhibit something, what we learned. And I was like already in the course, I was like, okay, I'm making some sort of like game, because I really like, if people have like a little objective that they have to do. And one of the cool things that they also taught us during the workshop is just like, if something is electronic in any kind of way, you can usually open it up and make it part of your project and circuit. Because usually, like if you open up an old like electronic toy, like a children's toy that are usually like covered in plastic, and you open it up, it's usually like battery and a motor and like 3 cables or 4 maximum. And this is just like you can directly integrate this into your circuit usually. And for that thing, I had like, it was a flying pig toy. So it was like a hard plastic pig with like wings, and it had, if you pull the switch, the wings would fly, or like it would move the wings. I was like, okay, I want to make this pig fly. I call it Picarus, like Icarus. And so for our end of program exhibition, we spun like a cable diagonally through a room, and I hooked up the little pig onto this line, and at the end we had like one of these IKEA balloon or like light things that's just like round and just like, okay, this is the sun, put like a very like orangey light bulb into it. And then I had like a long or like a strong 12-volt motor to pull the pig on this cable throughout the room. And what people had to do to help the pig fly to the sun was that they had to blow into like an old computer fan. So
Okay.
these like are used for cooling. Yeah, because I learned, that was also the thing that I learned, is that not just you can move things with electricity, but also if you make things move, you create electricity. So if you blow into a fan hard enough, you create a small current. So I was like, okay, if people blow hard enough to a certain threshold, it will start the motor, and then the pig will like flap its wings and fly across the room into the sun. And that was like my thing. And it was like horribly hard to build all of the electronics and like the circuits around it, because like motors is especially hard. But I was like, this was so cool and so mind-blowing. And then from there on out, I was like, okay, every time I learned a new programming environment, my first thing is like, okay, can I read serial input output it directly, hook an other into it, so that I can like gather sensor data and like have anything interact with it. It's just my favorite thing. I love it so much. It's really cool.
I see. Yeah, like judging from what you said and your talk, I think you have special lenses that, like, people see normal objects, you see, I don't know, ideas of possible games to create. Yeah, I see how you got into this field somehow. Yeah, and yeah, speaking about like the work you did, are there, like, what are the artworks that you're most proud of, or like, yeah, even games?
There are 2, I think. None of them have anything to do with Rust. They're both JavaScript projects. But
No
there's
judgment.
I think it's by now it's no judgment. I've worked with so many languages. I'm like, but there's this pretty big game jam, or like I think now it's huge actually. The JS13K game jam happens in summer, and where you have to write a game in JavaScript, and the whole what you submit in the end, or like the game size, also including the HTML and everything, cannot be larger than 13 kilobytes. So you have to like kind of think about, okay, how do I ideally generate assets, or use something that's like really small, or like it's lots of like, okay, how much graphics can I program so that like my sizes are really small. And there's like, they added this category later on for WebVR where you could use the A-frame framework that was then not counted into the 13K, otherwise it would not work. So you had like the A-frame library, and then you had 13 kilobytes of working, like of your own game logic. And I think this one year I made it to top 3 in that category, or top 5 maybe, with a game that's called Cat Meow, where I built a cat just of like 3D geometry things. Looked really bad. I was like, flat shading will cover this for me, hopefully. But it used spatial sound, and so like the cat would meow somewhere around you. You couldn't see it, and then you had to turn your head towards the source of the noise. And it was like super fun and super easy to do, and it was like, apparently people liked it and voted it up into like the top thing, which I was like, yeah, cool, made a VR
Nice.
game with a cat. And the other one is, I think, also a game that I made for JS13K. I think I called it Backstreet's Back. It's based on the Backstreet Boys song Backstreet's Back. All right. I do this sometimes where there's like some pop songs just create an image in my head, and I'm like, I should make a game for this pop song. And it's kind of it's actually also a rail shooter, like the Riding in the Park with Parrots alt control game that I presented at Eurorust, where you move through the level automatically, but then all around you are like little pieces of lyrics from like the Backstreet Boys song, and in the background there's just the loop of the bass line of the song. It's just like doom 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 doom. I think it goes. So it's just like it's a very monotone, but like if you know the song, I think you can like gather where the bass line comes from, and then every time you have to you find these lyrics, it's being read out to you. So it's all like, for me, it was all like play with weird browser APIs, because the bass sound is just like pure web audio. It's all like synthesized real time, and then the lyrics are read out, and the voice that reads it is the web speech API. So you can you get this for free in the browser. You just query a thing, and then the browser reads it out to you. And then for some reason, I think in Chrome, so I just picked there's a list of voices that the browser, different browsers have different voices for this. And I think I just picked the first, array index 0. And then in different browsers, it's different voice. And I think in one browser, it has a woman with a Russian accent as the first voice. And it's just so funny, because then it's the lyrics are read if you know the song, it's am I the only one? Am I original? Am I sexual? And then how the song goes, and it's so weird, really, really weird, and it's nothing that I planned before. But I was this is amazing, because it's such weird wetness in one game. I'm really proud of it, but I think it's honestly one of my least known games, if anybody knows my games at all. But I really, really like it, for the weirdness factor.
I have a question. So you made these alt control games, so they're only you can only play them if you have them, right? Have you thought about doing a stripped version of these games where you can play with the keyboard, or something that you have at home, so that people can play your games even if they are not maybe at the event?
Yeah, that's the biggest drawback for alt control. You kind of need to have the controller. I had 2 projects where I tried similar, where I tried to do a fallback with a keyboard. For one of them was basically drawing with a regular gamepad, where you could it was basically a drawing thing where you can just use the joystick on the gamepad to draw actually squares. And then I tried to have the same kind of feeling that it's really fun and free with the joystick, with something that you could do with a keyboard, but it's it never quite feels the same. And while you could just do it with a keyboard, it's not, for me, it doesn't have the same feeling. And in the other game, I used a MIDI keyboard for movement. And then nobody has a MIDI keyboard around to play with this. So I also did a keyboard fallback for that. And that was okay, because it was still pushing keys to do a thing. But yeah, I do want to give people the opportunity to have a fallback for this, but depending on if this feels kind of close to the feeling that I want people to have when they play it, I built a fallback, but sometimes I'm also this is then too far away from what I wanted, so then I don't. And this is why I would never make money with games.
No, yeah, but I can see that the peculiar thing about alt control game is the alternative controller, so it makes sense that is the first way you should play them. Yeah, cool. So speaking about Rust, you gave your first Rust talk in 2017, which is a lot of time. And I wanted to know how you got into Rust in the first place, and why you still use it today to create your games and so on.
Yeah. So that's a fun story because I live in Berlin, and the various tech communities here have been like, there are some very good communities where like I go to meetups and I know a lot of people. And I used to be very active in the Ruby community as well, and that's where I met Florian Gilche, who you probably know, and people who are around Rust probably know. And Florian used to be like also like very active in the Ruby community. And at one point he was like started talking about this Rust thing. Oh, it's a new language, it's really cool. It's like it will soon hit like the 1.0 release, and it's like, we're gonna have a party. And I was like, yeah, like whatever Florian's into right now. I was not really, I don't know, I wasn't hooked immediately. But then the first ever Rust Fest happened in Berlin in 2016, and Florian was like, "Hey, like you should come. We have a couple of diversity tickets. Like, there's a couple of like people that I would like to like could have a good time there because it's like, you don't have to know Rust to just like come and see also what the community is like and if you like it." So I was like, "Okay, I will go. How bad can it be?" And it was really nice. There were a couple of talks that I didn't understand a single word what they were talking about, and it was like okay, but then there were a couple of talks that was like, I understand this, and this seems to pay off. People mentioned fighting the borrow checker a lot, but also the nice error messages, so everything that I still talk about today. So I was like, okay, I will give it a try, this Rust. And then so what I would usually do if I like learn a new programming language, it's like look for us there like a game engine or something, and then just like try to make a game with it and then see how far I go. Like will I even manage to make this game, or will I like fail? And so this is what ended up being like my talk at Eurorust, not Eurorust, RustFest in 2017 was basically like me. It's like, okay, I'm a complete newbie. Can I make a game in Rust? Back then was the Piston game engine, which was like one of the early game engines in the ecosystem. I don't even know if that's still in active development. I have no idea actually. And from then, but I also then moved on. Like then the whole community and the whole ecosystem started to like really grow, and like lots of stuff popped up. But yeah, that was how that started, and it was like really. I have to say that once the game compiled in its final state, it felt so accomplished. Of like, wow, I made it through a lot of pain and a lot of struggle. Most of the time, when I had like the classic Rust errors of like, oh, you moved the value here, like, but you moved it before. I was like, what does it mean? What do I need to do? So I was learning the hard way, because like I think I didn't even read the book before I did that. It was like after I read the book, I was like, oh, I should have read this book before.
Yes, it helps. Yes.
It helps a lot. So but it was a good time. And I was like, this is really cool, because like once I understood that the compiler is really like there to help me like write better code, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then I never, like once things compiled, I never ran into like issues, and was like fine, was like, this is actually great. Yeah, so I've been a fan ever since, and every project where I can freely pick my language, I pick Rust.
Nice. Yeah, it's great that you went to a conference that you didn't know anything about. I think many people, like maybe including me, would be a bit scared to do so. And also, a lot of people think that to talk about, like to do a technical talk about, for example, a programming language or stuff like that, you need to be an expert in that. And yeah, I don't think that's true. And you, for example, you demonstrated this. Because speaking about like your first talk, of course, you said that you just wanted to share your learning experience and see if you can build a game starting with this programming language from scratch. And I think that I find these talks really interesting. You don't see them a lot, but see like beginners showing where they struggle and stuff like that. I think it's really helpful, both for other beginners like you, because maybe they can learn how to start better, and also for experienced people because they learn what they should improve into the language. Yeah, so thanks for that.
I
Yes.
agree with everything you said.
Yeah, and like I'm curious, like what do you think it changed from Rust since like this since 2016? Because I started learning Rust in 2019, so I'm curious what changed now with respect to when you start.
That's a good question. So I think in the big scheme of things, it's still mostly the same. So like like all of the big ecosystem things were like there. Like I think RustUp was already there. There was like Cargo and Crates.io and like but what I think changed the most is the amount of crates that are on Crates.io. So I don't have a super overview over like all parts of the ecosystem, obviously, but since I do a little bit of web programming, I can say it's like, oh, like back then there was like Rocket as a web framework. I think that was mostly it. And now there's already too many to choose from. You have to like see, it's like, oh, I always look like which one has the best documentation because like I really need documentation.
Makes sense.
And the same for like game engines. So I was really hyped almost when I found out about Nanu as a creative coding framework in Rust. So that was really like I did lots of projects with Nanu, also kind of like workshops using it as a tool. That was like really like once like things like this started popping up, I was like, this is really cool. And then also, yeah, like like there's this natural cycle, I think, of like, oh, there's this new thing and they do it differently. I think for game engine that was that Amethyst used to be like, it's like, oh, it's the new data-driven thingy. And then like I think what was really nice when they announced like, okay, we're stopping the project kind of, so that it's like, okay, this is it. So but then like there's new projects that learn from the old projects, and now we have Bevy, and it's like, hey, this is really cool. So it's kind of this like you see a couple of cycles of or generations of like of projects evolving in the certain niches and areas, and I think that's really interesting. And I just like watching them a little bit, and then every time I get to do a project, I'm like, okay, what's the current state of the art? Do you have good documentation for me to learn it quickly? But I think the Rust community is very good at it generally, with like writing things, like even which is also like, I think it's like a language thing, but like also just like having this convention almost of like, there is an examples folder with examples that you can run. Like even if you don't have time to write like documentation, you can like just drop a couple of examples on how to use your code, which is usually more that I can say from some JavaScript libraries that I wanted to use, where I'm like, okay, but how am I supposed to integrate it in like the bigger thing? I'm like, I really need like an example or documentation, like either or, give me something. So I am very grateful that Rust has that because I need it.
Yeah, I think that since like I also find that in general Rust crates have great documentation, especially of course the most important ones. But I think that like it's not because Rust developers are like I don't know special. I think that Rust developers write a lot of documentation because it's easier to write. It's easy to write documentation in Rust. The tooling is so good. You can do like cargo doc, and yeah, there is this HTML website that is automatically created when you publish something. And yeah, as you said, there are a lot of conventions. For example, the examples folders and so on. The tooling is so good that you are encouraged to write documentation.
I think so. I think that's a big thing.
And so behind Rust, what do you think are the other programming languages used to be a good creative technologist, and also beyond programming, what do you think are the most useful skills to learn to become a good creative technologist?
Good question. So I think there is no way around JavaScript. It is what it is. I think it's also like because both the client and server aspect of it, which I hope that like Rust maybe will take that spot eventually, that we just like Rust everywhere, which is also why I'm really excited for Rust to write it everywhere, and like I don't have to write JavaScript. That is, usually something goes wrong, and I don't want to rant, but it is like, I guess, like the language that I spend most time with in most other projects, and it's also usually when I collaborate with people who are self-taught, or like especially like in the creative context, lots of people are self-taught, and this is usually the language that they learn with, and then mostly the only language that they know, aside from maybe if they only know, or like they only learned Unity 3D, let's say. So yeah, which brings me to that probably learning. So I do think that like learning one, let's say, like big game engine is definitely a super useful thing, and then know it well, because usually game engines have, or like offer lots of like input output possibilities for various kinds of things that are not specifically games. So yeah, like learn Unreal or Unity or Godot, one of these, so that you have like one thing that gives you the opportunity to write a program that you can make any kind of application, and it's easy to do like maybe prototypes with or something. I think that's really helpful. I think with this you can go like a long way. Like I think web programming and like some game engine stuff is really good. And then I think that depends on what you want to focus on. So if you're really into audio stuff, there's other audio environments that are probably good, like Maximus P if you want to do, or Ableton as a digital audio workstation to do real-time and interactive things, because it has like APIs for that. So that's really cool if you more of like the sound. And then obviously more heavily into graphics and shader programming if you want to do visualizations or projections, which is like this is very far outside of my wheelhouse, projection mappings. But it's like a cool thing to know. Like if you know how to like program GLSL or like any kind of, if shaders are your home, maybe you could be a creative technologist, because it's a very looked for skill actually. Yeah, and then whatever, like also like physical computing, actually, I should mention this. If like Arduinos or like Raspberry Pi programming, if you can do that, that's definitely a plus. But there's so many things. So like just pick what you want to do and then stick to that. And then there's probably projects for you, or like just keep working with what you want, and then people think, or like will find your word and think, I want this.
I see. So my next question is, let's think about, for example, a Rust developer who just started learning Rust. For example, maybe he completed the book and he did some pet projects, stuff like that, and he would like to get into game development. Maybe because he's listening to this conversation. And what would be a good first project for him? And maybe what game engines would you suggest this person to get started?
That's an excellent question. I would say, depending on, if you want to say, like, I want to make like a small quick game just to try it out. I would I don't know. So like I really like the GGEZ game engine, because it's a very small 2D game engine in Rust. It has a very little boilerplate code, and you can like make a thing that's really quick. And if you come from more, I think it's depending on what kind of like programming paradigm you're coming from. I think like most people like it's more this like object oriented related thinking, let's say, of like, okay, I build my struct that's like my player, and it has those properties, and then I move it around or something. And then just that for experimenting, I think, or just like trying it out, I think GGZ is nice. It has like audio and like basic things, so it has everything you need. But if you think like, oh, maybe you want to spend a little bit more time with like learning some other game programming related concepts, I think Bevy is the big thing. The introduction is really good. There's lots of really good resources and tutorials also on YouTube. You can do 2D and 3D, and like the plugin ecosystem for it is really, I was impressed when I looked into it, like what already exists. And it's, so it's like, and there's also like different layers of abstraction depending on, it's like, I just want like a sound to play and that's it. I don't want to deal with it. Or I want to play with it a little bit. Can I do like some interactive panning, depending on like, something happens, so make it a little more exciting. So like there's like various stuff already out there, and it's just like a very cool architecture, like because it's an ECS entity component system, and it was also my first introduction to this kind of architecture, because I used to do my games in this very like, as I said, object oriented related kind of thinking. But ECS is really like it's different, because like I mentioned Amethyst, the previous ECS game engine in the Rust ecosystem, which I never tried, because I think around that time I was like really into learning Nanu, and then I didn't jump on that bandwagon, but I jumped on the Bevy bandwagon now, and it was like, this is really cool. Learn something new, and it's really, really good. It's really nice. So this would be my recommendation. Start with the intro guide on Bevy. And then they have a collection of community resources, and from there you find everything. It's really well organized, and it's very easy to find things, I think. Good job, Bevy team.
Great. And do you think, because I never tried Bevy, do you think that what are the main thing that maybe Bevy miss with respect to other game engines like Godot, Unity, and similar?
I think so. The obvious thing is that it doesn't have an GUI editor like Unity or Godot. So you have to program everything. And at first I was like, this seems like a lot of work, especially for like a 3D game. But it's pretty quick once you understand how Bevy works and how you put your components and entities together. And I was like, for the Riding in the Park with Parrots game, I think I had most of what I presented at the conference I had done within a week of learning Bevy and then coding my own project. So it was like, this is actually, it was like, once I understood how I had to think, I was like, okay, this is actually, I can get this to work like insanely quickly. And it's like, because I was like following this discussion of like, like a GUI editor for Bevy. And I'm even now like, but do you really need it? Because you learn so much by not clicking. But I can understand how people are like, okay, but some things I just want to like drop down, click, and then be done. But now I'm like, it was refreshing to like do so much stuff in code again, and not, because I sometimes use Godot also for workshops with teenagers, where you can do a lot of things without ever touching code, which is great for doing workshops with kids who don't know how to program. But then it was like fun to go back to just programming the entire game. So that was cool.
I can imagine that many developers who maybe use Vim or Emacs, they will consider this a feature and not something missing. Yeah, and so let's say that this developer maybe got their first game running with Bevy or something, but they want to make alt control games because they are awesome. So they would like also to getting started with embedded. Yeah, same questions. Like, what do you think are good first projects, and maybe which hardware is best for getting started?
So that's an interesting question, because like embedded for me is still kind of magical in a way. So when I learned Arduino, so in the Arduino world, you program Arduino flavored C++ basically, but the Arduino platform in a way abstracts a lot of like the actual bare metal programming from you, which is great for beginners. But then I also realized that there's like certain things that I never properly learned about embedded development. And then now going into Rust embedded development, I realized that I'm missing a lot of knowledge. So it's really, if your goal is I just want to make some kind of controller that works with my game. I don't care if I run Rust on my microcontroller or not. Maybe just try Arduino and see if that works for you. Because like, as I said, it's pretty easy to get started. But if you're maybe already like had a little bit of experience, like you really want to like try Rust embedded, so the Rust embedded book is really good. They've also written like a very good book on how to get started, like on their microcontrollers with Rust, and what to look out for, what you need for setup, and then like walk you through things. And they also provide more and more material for like non-professional embedded developers to learn this. Because, for example, I've never written like my own driver for like any kind of sensor or like to like integrate this on my microcontroller, because like for me it was like I don't really know what I'm doing there. And for me, the journey ends when I see that whatever sensor or module I want to use doesn't have a driver that is compatible with Rust or like with the microcontroller itself yet. Like my journey ends there. And then it was actually like at Eurorust, I talked to some embedded people, and they were like, it's easier than you think, like really. So like a couple of people were like, just try it, just write one very simple thing, and then you will notice it's so easy. And I'm like, you say this, but you're a professional embedded developer. But it was actually also it was motivating for me to say, okay, I should try this at least once to see if I can get it running. And if you're kind of in that same mindset, maybe then the embedded guide, the Rust ESP, maybe it's called the Rust ESP book. I need to look this up. Like these are great resources, and also this by now like a lot of example projects that you can just flash on your board and see how does it work. Just really just like reading lots of code and understanding it. And then to actually get a controller working, most of the time you really only need one or two measurements or like a couple of things you need to pick up and then send into your game, and then you can write more logic in the game engine itself. This is usually how I do it. Raw measurements from the controller, and then do most of the processing within the game.
I see. Yeah, I think your suggestion to use Arduino, for example, is great, because I think if you're getting started with embedded, it's better if you start on an hardware that is well supported by your language. So maybe either it is Arduino with I don't know, C, or like another board that maybe you read online that there are already nice libraries and that abstracts the hardware. Then that's great, because when you start, you immediately, I don't know, push button and then let the goes on. You get some stuff done, and then if you are passionate about it, then you can go deep and maybe, yeah, try to implement that hardware abstraction by yourself. But then, yeah, as you said, it's better to get started with something that is tested and works first. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of resources. If you want, feel free to send them to me after, so I can put them in the episode description. So in particular, I wanted to ask you, what hardware and tools do you use for your projects?
That depends on the projects. So I am actually quite a fan of the ESP32 series, because so they come with the microcontrollers that already come with a Wi-Fi antenna, like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC maybe. I don't even know, because I do. So if you want to do like wireless remote controlled thingy, it's just very cool because you have like an ESP board that is like you can attach basically anything and then have it measure or control something, and then you can sit somewhere else and then like look at the measurements from somewhere else. So like for the we had an interactive theater play where the audience had flashlights to solve light-based puzzles basically. So I had like, we called them sensor boxes with photoresistors, so that I could measure how much light or how much of the audience is actually shining light into a particular sensor, and then had like one box for red, one box for green, and one box for blue. They had like colored LEDs and then also white status LEDs, so that I could like then say, okay, I could like remotely activate the box. Like each box has an ESP, I should say, running with just like off a power bank. Actually, just like plug it in so that I could position them anywhere in the room. And then from the side, I could see like activate the LEDs, could see how much light each box receives, and then like steer the puzzles from there. And that was really cool. It was like no Rust, it was just like standard Arduino. But this was like, yeah, ESP boards and then some like super basic components and LEDs. So things like that. And then like, I don't know, there's a couple of online shops that buy lots of weird things on eBay still, because that's where you find weird things on the internet, I think. And that ships. The rest is on you maybe find locally. Like I've also picked up a lot of trash that is like on the streets of Berlin. I'm like, I could use this for a project. So yeah, like I from that side, I was just like, I really either I have an idea and try to find components cheaply that kind of match, or I find things, or like people are like, at this point people are like, I have this old XYZ, do you want this? And I'm like,
It's hard to say no, right?
maybe I want this. Yeah. Yeah. So I have a little trash corner where I store just like things, and like then I think about what to do with them. But for that, I don't really have like a set anything, because like anything could be a tool, and this is
Yeah.
also kind of interesting.
I can imagine. Yes. Cool. So in November 2021, you organized Rust in Arts, which was a virtual event, and yeah, for the recordings are on YouTube if people want to check it out. And yeah, tell us a bit more about this event, like how was organizing it, and if you plan to organize it in the future.
Yeah, that's a funny story, I think, because yeah, so it was the middle of the pandemic still, or like in Rust. So yeah, RustFest used to, like, it was a conference that traveled around Europe, and I think in 2019 it happened, like, I think already in 18 and 19 it happened twice a year actually. So we're all kind of like, everybody was preparing for the next RustFest, and then it was the pandemic, and then RustFest kind of managed to organize this RustFest Global mega online conference, which was a whole thing. It was super cool. And then in 2021, they were kind of like, okay, we want to change it a little bit, like have several smaller focused online conferences instead of one 3-day continuous conference. And then one idea for the new format was to have it based on like regions around the world, so like in North America, like Australia, Oceania, like European, and like Arabic countries, like around the Mediterranean and stuff. But like one idea was then also to have it like maybe focused on a topic. And the Flaki, one of the organizers, actually approached me and persuaded me hard to maybe take over organizing Rust in Arts. And I really liked the idea, because I already knew from some projects in the art space that there's really cool things, like very super technical and super difficult problems that people solve in the space, but they are kind of overlooked because it's art and it's not, our fancy new technology thingy that some startup has an entire team working on for several months, but like some of these artists solve problems in weeks by themselves, and it's kind of like really cool what a single person can do if they really want to. Like this kind of creative spirit I admire this a lot. And on I wanted to see this and highlight this, but on the other hand, I didn't really know a lot of actual Rust users in the art space yet. Was like, okay, maybe I also find out some other people who do cool things that I can follow. So it was like, okay, I would put this up, and I think overall it took like in my memory, it wasn't even 2 months of organizing. We reached out because we wanted to, because I'm a big video game person. I also wanted to like highlight some games that are using Rust. So we talked to different like indie game studios. It wasn't really like a traditional talk format, but it was more like short interviews with game makers. For example, with like the people from the Valoran team, which people who do Rust in games probably know as like this voxel multiplayer game. And the idea was that just like, we talk to a developer while they play their game, or like walk us through their game. So it's kind of like a casual interview play along thing. And just like, like talk a little bit about it. Like, yeah, and it's still like a format that I really like, because it has value about like, as you mentioned earlier, this kind of like personal stories. So like what was hard? What did you not expect? How did you solve certain things? But it's also through this dialogue thing, it feels more, I don't know, like more approachable. And then we could also like read questions from the chat and stuff. So I really like this. And then we also had like, yeah, classic talks where like people present their projects. And this was really cool. when we had like people from North America, Europe, and Australia, and that was a lot of fun. I think the worst part for me was the bookkeeping, because we had like artists play, so like, okay, pay the artists, like, so there were like little artist performances, like live coding style, also in between. Pay the artists, pay the speakers, and then like I got some help with Vlake from the RustFest, but it's like I hate bookkeeping so much. It is the worst part about self-employment, is doing your own bookkeeping. It's like, oh my god, yeah. So I I do not enjoy this, but I would do it again if I to put this on again. Actually, spoiler, I did at Eurorust talk to the organizers again if we should do like another Rust and Arts, maybe next year.
Cool.
Nothing definite, but I would do it again, and if I get help again, it's probably gonna happen again.
Nice. Looking forward to it then. Yeah, like it was a great conversation. Thank you, Lisa. Do you have any plans for the future apart from Rust in Arts 2024? Because that's definitely going to happen.
I think there's a couple of Rust events happening in the first half of the year, but I haven't really looked into it. And then when I go to a Rust conference, I also want to submit something, because I think like being a speaker makes it really easy to get to know people, because usually people come to you and then they invite you to your podcast. So I need to look into it. And then also there's a computation and arts conference in Italy also that I wanted to look. I don't even know how to say it. XCOAX, if this is how you pronounce it, or like I don't know how the organizers want to read it. I can also send you the link for the description, which I was like looking at to branch out and look at more artsy things that are not just Rust. But aside from that, I don't really know yet. But
Okay.
It's also nice to have a free year and not super many plans already in December before, or like November before.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the plan is like doing more conferences, sending more call for proposals. I like it. Yes, nice. Yeah, great. Thank you for your conversation. I really enjoyed it. It was very interesting. How can people find you online? What are your contacts?
I think right now the best way to reach me is on Mastodon, actually. It's @listless@toot.cat, or if you're not on Mastodon, mail@listless.de. And then usually I put all my stuff on GitHub, code-wise, which is also just listless on GitHub. Do not look at my personal website, because I have not updated that in 12 years. So priorities, I guess.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just small spam. Like if listeners, if you read until here, it means that you're enjoying the podcast. So subscribe to it, to your favorite podcast client, and subscribe to YouTube, and follow me and Lisa on social media. Thank you for listening, and I hope you appreciated. Stay tuned for the next episodes, and thanks again, Lisa. See you soon at another conference.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.